This is Scott Spears, and when it came time to launch this new program, I knew immediately who the first guest was going to be. She has become a good friend. She is a journalist I respect, the one and only Dean of the White House Press Corps, Helen Thomas. Helen, how are you?
I'm fine.
My name is eternally in this area linked with yours because of the interview we did, and I can't think of anybody better to have my name linked with journalistically.
Poor man.
Helen, all the times we've talked, I don't think we ever talked about your childhood growing up in Kentucky and Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, I thought it was wonderful, really. My parents were, even though they couldn't read or write English, they were so bright, and they cared mostly about education. Family of 9 children, they wanted them all to go to college. So I was very lucky to have that kind of a family because we were really in an ethnic neighborhood. Germans on one side, Italians on the other, and I don't think they had the same impetus. I hope they did. But my parents were determined that we'd all be educated.
Why do you think that was so important to them?
Because they were so intelligent. They knew that in America you could only really survive and aspire if you had an education.
Do you think that kids in college and maybe even in grade school today are instilled with that same belief?
I hope so, because I think that nothing greater than to have an education. It's the passport to a better life.
I think you're right. Helen, you chose journalism as a field, and I don't want to stay too much on this, but that was a time when women were not working, period, let alone going into journalism. That was kind of...
Well, they were working. They were stenographers. They were telephone operators. They had many kinds of jobs. And then when World War II broke out, women showed that they could do anything, and they were so needed because they were drafting every young man who had a pulse.
Why did you end up choosing journalism?
Because I was always interested in history. I thought it was an exciting life, and I worked on the high school paper, and I was hooked for life.
Going into that field, was it harder, do you think, being a female than it would have been being a male at that time?
Of course, much harder. But then it was hard for women in medicine, in law, in academia. Everything was hard for women because they had not been totally accepted in those professions.
You know, Helen, I think for you having this perspective, it's easy to talk about, but I think people hearing this today might not understand why it was hard. What was different for a female than a male back then? How did people treat you?
Well, I remember when I started covering the White House, I could belong to the White House Correspondents Association, but I could not attend their annual dinner, which was in honor of the President of the United States. At that time, it was President Kennedy. So we women could not understand or tolerate the fact that we could not go to the dinner. We appealed to President Kennedy and said, look, we're members of the association, but we can't go. And we don't think you should go as a guest of honor if we can't go. Well, he agreed, and that's the first time women were able to go to the dinner. And now they always go, of course, and we've had women heads of the White House correspondents, including myself, so there is progress.
That first dinner you went to when Kennedy said, I won't go if the women can't come, what was the atmosphere like that night?
Well, the men couldn't believe it. And then the scales began to fall from their eyes, and they began to realize that we were in the profession too and going toe-to-toe with them on different stories, so why should we have been excluded? Well, they said, we've only had males at this dinner. I said, so what you have to do is change and grow up.
You also were the first female admitted to the Gridiron Club. How did that happen?
Well, they too, members of the Gridiron, was all male, and they began to feel quite guilty about it. And the women's movement was going into full flower at that time. So they realized there were some liberal members in the Gridiron. They realized that they had to take women in. And now they have many women.
You know, Helen, you mentioned a buzzword there, liberal. A lot of people have called you liberal, and you agree with that.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be anything else.
But so many people in this country, when you say liberal, they associate it with Democrat. What does liberal mean to you? What's your definition?
That we care. We care about people. We believe that government should help those who cannot help themselves. We believe in strong social programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, everything that helps people who are more deprived.
Helen, you're one of the leading journalists of our time, no doubt about it.
No.
Oh, I think everything says that. Have you ever pulled a punch at a press conference, in an interview? Have you ever held back for any reason?
No. I feel that it's the greatest opportunity to be able to question a president, and you shouldn't drop the ball. You should take advantage of that one opportunity that can inform the American people of why we go to war, what we're doing there, when are we going to get the hell out.
Have you ever thought about pulling a punch?
No.
Never even gave
Well, I think that at the time when President Clinton was in trouble, I did hesitate, but I went ahead with the questions, and also when President Nixon was under fire, I was called on for the first question, and I had a question about Watergate, which really would have nailed the president. And then I thought, what are the American people going to think of me? Here I am treating the president so badly when he falls on me first, and he praised me for becoming head of the UPI Bureau at the White House. So I had that moment of hesitation, but then I went and asked the question because I thought my own integrity was at stake. So I felt pretty guilty about it, but still.
Have you ever felt guilty any other times about asking anything?
No, I really think that no reporter should pull a punch at a time when they had the great privilege of questioning the president. I don't think you should be mean or derogatory or really, not being very partial. I think that's very important to be straight, but at the same time, you shouldn't pass up that opportunity because people have the right to know, and you're only there to inform people.
You know, Helen, what was the mood in the White House press corps when Woodward and Bernstein cracked this story on Watergate?
Well, of course, we felt bad, but at the same time, when you're on the body watch to see if the president's still alive, when you go out with him and all these things and so forth, you had no way and no time to do great investigative reporters. The Washington Post and the New York Times both put 18 reporters each on that story. They had them roaming the whole town, interviewing everyone. We couldn't do that. We couldn't leave our beat because it's really the body watch.
Helen, when most people say your name, the one thing they know about Helen Thomas is she's that tough lady. She's that tough lady. You kind of have this gruff image. Where does that come from, do you think?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? I think because I don't take any guff. My questions, I roll the ball right down the middle. I don't do what people like you are going to have to do, which is to ask a question in 10 sentences so you can hold the camera on you.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it's going, unfortunately.
Well, no, I didn't mean to dig you, but I mean, on television, they keep talking. They're asked to analyze instantly a bot news story, which is ridiculous.
The guest becomes a prop, and I think that's a little crazy. Hopefully we can stay away from that on this show. Helen, a lot of interesting things going on in the world right now I'd like to get your take on. What do you make of what happened in Egypt?
In Egypt?
Yes.
Hooray, hooray. I think it's magnificent. When you consider revolutions, the one in Egypt was fairly peaceful, and I think it showed the resolve of the people to get rid of a one-man rule over 40 years. Enough is enough. Secret police, imprisonment, all the things that are horrifying in a fascist government.
Libya right now is going on. What do you make of what's going on in that area?
Well, I'm hoping the rebels will win, but I don't know. Gaddafi has pulled out all the stops. He has the heavy artillery. He knows his whole country, and he's paid mercenaries from Africa. So it's very, very difficult for the rebels who have no strong leadership, and they don't have the arms.
What do you feel the United States' place in this should be?
I think we should do exactly what we did in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union, which is really to pour the artillery and heavy weapons in to help the rebels.
What do you make of this Gaddafi? He's an interesting character.
Well, I'll go with everybody else's description that he's a madman. Actually, he's a one-man ruler, autocratic, can't give up can't give up power. But at the same time, I think he'll run. When chips are down, I don't think he fights the last man.
Helen, we're heading into another election. Things are starting to heat up a little bit. What do you think the chances are right now, if we held the election tomorrow, that Obama would get reelected?
Oh, I think he would. The Republicans have no one.
Why do you think that is? It's very strange that they haven't really put anybody front.
I don't think this country wants anybody who's off the center and is far right.
Who do you think the right now, who do you think the front runner is?
I don't know.
I was thinking about that the other day. I thought maybe...
They don't have anyone, really. Well, I think maybe the most sane is Romney, but he doesn't seem to be as popular. The others are really off the wall.
What's Obama's report card look like?
He lacks courage. He should have gone after Republicans that Ryan plan in your Ohio. I mean, he is unbelievable. He wants to wipe out the New Deal, Social Security, the Great Society, all the LBJ, Medicare, Medicaid, public housing, everything. I think this is one of the cruelest budgets and the most tyrannical that we've ever had in this country. And I'm hoping even Republicans will turn it down. But they didn't in the House. They passed it.
It's
all but 4.
If you were in the front row today, what would you ask President Obama?
I ask him, why doesn't he fight? What's he got to lose?
You know, Helen, last year when all the hubbub was going down over the situation with you and Israel and Palestine, in that whole event, what did you feel was the worst moment? What did you like the least about that?
I was shocked that the Society of Professional Journalists wanted to take away my honors, that the White House correspondents denounced me, and my own university took away a scholarship fund in my name because I said that Israel is brutal toward the Palestinians. I have a right to my opinion. I also have the right of freedom of speech, and I could not believe that the Israeli lobby, Abe Foxman, Ari Fleischer, and all of these people would take such a stand against me and go to every university and try to wipe me out. And I could not believe my colleagues would not understand that I have a right to speak. As an American, I have a right, and my views on Israel had nothing to do with my experience as a journalist.
Did any of your colleagues ever reach out to you during that time?
Sam Donaldson has been wonderful, and a few, but I couldn't believe even photographers signed on to denounce me. And then the head of the Society of Professional Journalists was born in Israel. I wouldn't expect her to do anything else but support her native land or whatever.
Why do you feel the majority of your colleagues denounced you?
Fear.
Fear of what?
I spoke the other day at Loyola University in Chicago, and the students, it was a Palestinian group of students, wonderful. They were fantastic. And they had tried to get a group of faculty advisors to be their advisor. They went from one faculty member to the other, and they each said they couldn't do it because they would lose tenure, like Norman Finkelstein of DePaul.
Interesting world we live in.
Well, it's the creeping fascism when you have lobbyists turning you against your own principles of government.
Helen, a few months ago, you went back to work, and it was reported that you had reapplied for your credentials to the White House. Mm-hmm. Has anything happened with that?
No, I have a Hill pass, but I don't have a White House pass.
Now, what does a Hill pass allow you to do?
Well, just go to Capitol Hill and interview people and stay in the press room, the usual.
Has anybody contacted you in regard to the presidential pass?
No.
No. Do you think they will?
I think they won't. I think that they're so vindictive. They're afraid.
What are they afraid of?
The Israeli lobby. Their jobs.
Helen, I got to wrap up this interview by asking you two questions. First one, when all this is going on and you were receiving so much criticism, did you ever say, why me?
Did I ever what?
Did you ever say, why me? Why is this happening to me?
Hell no. I think it should be me. I put my foot out. I mean, I stuck my head out. I did everything that I knew could crucify me, but I thought I should have integrity and stand by my views, which is that the Israelis treat Palestinians brutally. They have walls in Arab-only places. They have Israeli-only roads in the West Bank. They treat them, they shoot them, the children. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Final question I have for you, Helen, is probably the question I've been asked the most since I did the interview with you back in October of 2010. Why did you finally decide to speak, and how did it come about that you chose me to do the first interview? Well,
because you've been very kind, very fair. You don't jump in and attack me every time I open my mouth. I like that, and I think you're a fair reporter.
Well, Helen, those words coming from you mean a lot to me, and I really, truly mean it. Having you on as the first guest on this show, maybe it'll make headlines, maybe it won't, but it's certainly...
I think you're going to be boycotted from here on in.
Helen, you're a pal of mine, and I'd never leave your side for anything. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Scott Spears, headed for the dugout.